Hi, my name is AJ, and today I'll be talking about chapters 15 to 22 of Reforming Organizations by Lee G. Bowman and Terrence E. Deal. First, we're going to start with chapter 15, Improving Leadership Practice and Integrating Frames for Effective Practice. Chapter 15 focuses on the concept of integrating the 4 frames of organizational analysis to improve leadership and decision-making. This chapter emphasizes that effective leadership involves recognizing and using the different frames to understand complex organizational situations. The 4 frames are tools that allow leaders to see problems and opportunities from multiple perspectives, and the ability to integrate them is crucial for making a balanced and informed decision. Some key ideas of this chapter include the challenge of integration. The chapter argues that real leadership involves integrating these frames in a new way that allows for a more nuanced understanding of organizational challenges. Rather than relying solely on one frame, successful leaders must be able to reframe situations by shifting between perspectives. For instance, a leader might use the structural frame to address an efficiency issue, but then turn to the human resource frame to consider the needs of employees who are affected by the change. Another idea is practical application. The authors provide examples of leaders who effectively integrate frames into their work, illustrating how reframing allows them to approach problems in creative and more holistic ways. This chapter stresses that reframing is not just a skill, but a mindset that requires continuous practice and awareness of the complex dynamics within organizations. Another idea is reframing as a leadership skill. The authors highlight that reframing is an essential skill for leaders, enabling them to deal with ambiguity and conflicting demands. Leaders who can integrate the 4 frames are better equipped to deal with ambiguity and conflicting demands. Leaders who can incorporate the 4 frames are better equipped to handle complex and ever-changing organizational landscapes. Leaders need to assess which frame or combination of frames will be the most helpful for a given situation, and then use that understanding to guide action. The role of power and culture. The chapter also touches on the role of power and culture in integrating frames. For example, organizational culture shapes how people see the world and impacts which frames they are most likely to use. Similarly, power structures can influence how different frames are valued or ignored. In conclusion, this chapter calls for a more integrated approach to leadership and decision-making, encouraging leaders to recognize and blend multiple perspectives to deal with the complexities of organizational life. The authors argue that by integrating the 4 frames, leaders can craft more comprehensive, effective solutions and foster a deeper understanding of the intricate dynamics at play in their organization. In essence, this chapter builds on the idea that leadership is about flexibility and seeing and acting from multiple perspectives, and adapting one's approach to the demands of the situation. As we transition on to chapter 16, we focus more in on reframing in action, opportunities, and perils. Chapter 16 focuses on how to apply the 4 frames, structural, human resources, political, and symbolic, to real-world organizational situations. The chapter aims to show how leaders and managers can use these frames to diagnose and address challenges effectively. Some key points of this chapter include practical application on the 4 frames. The chapter emphasizes the importance of reframing as a political tool for leadership and organizational problem solving. The authors argue that by considering situations from multiple perspectives, the 4 frames, leaders can gain deeper understanding of issues and develop more effective strategies. The next point is reframing as a diagnostic tool. The authors suggest that reframing is not just about adopting one frame over another, but rather about using all 4 frames to diagnose a problem and choose the most effective course of action. For example, a leader might initially address a problem from a structural perspective, but upon deeper reflection, realize that human resources and symbolic factors might be at play, requiring a shift in approach. The next point is case studies and examples. Throughout the chapter, the authors provide examples and case studies to illustrate how reframing can be applied in various organizational contexts. These case studies highlight both successes and challenges, demonstrating that reframing is a repetitive process that requires leaders to be adaptable and thoughtful in their decision-making. Moving on to the next point, balancing the four frames. The chapter stresses that leaders should balance all four frames in their approach to leadership and decision making. Each frame offers a unique perspective, and an effective leader is one who can fluidly move between them based on the situation. For instance, when managing a crisis, leaders might start with structural solutions, such as setting clear goals and responsibilities, but also need to address the emotional and cultural needs of employees. Things like the political power dynamics and the symbolic importance of the organization's missions are important to this. The next point is learning to reframe. The authors also stress the importance of practicing and developing the skill of reframing. Leaders need to learn to ask different types of questions, challenge assumptions, and approach problems from multiple perspectives. Reframing is a tool that can enhance decision-making, foster creativity, and improve leadership effectiveness. The last point of this chapter is the power of perspective. The chapter concludes by emphasizing the power of perspective. By deliberating, shifting between frames, leaders can gain new insights, overcome limitations, and find innovative solutions to complex organizational problems. To conclude, Chapter 16 is about the practical application of the four frames. It shows how reframing can be used as a diagnostic tool for understanding and addressing organizational challenges. The chapter encourages leaders to approach problems from multiple perspectives, balancing structure, human resources, power dynamics, and symbolism to find effective solutions. As we transition into Chapter 17, Leadership in Theory and Practice, we see that Chapter 17 delves into the nature of leadership, examining both theoretical perspectives and practical applications. This chapter focuses on how leaders can navigate complex organizational environments using the four frames to enhance their effectiveness and create meaningful change. Moving on to leadership and theories and their application. The chapter begins by exploring various leadership theories that have evolved, highlighting their strengths and weaknesses. Some of these theories include behavioral theories. These theories emphasize the behaviors that leaders exhibit, such as being task-oriented or people-oriented. The chapter discusses how different behaviors can be more or less effective depending on the situation. Next is contingency and situational theories. These approaches highlight the importance of context in leadership, suggesting that there is no one-size-fits-all leadership style. Leaders need to adapt their approach based on the situation and the people involved. Lastly is trait theories. Early leadership theories focused on identifying innate traits or qualities that made a person a successful leader. For example, intelligence, charisma. However, these theories were criticized for failing to account for the role of the context and relationships in leadership. Next, the chapter focuses on the role of the four frames in leadership. The authors argue that effective leadership requires leaders to understand and apply all four frames, depending on the context. They provide insights into how leaders can use each frame to enhance their leadership practice. For the structural frame, leaders can use this frame to focus on creating clear roles, efficient systems, and rational processes within the organization. It also involves organizing work to achieve goals and ensuring that tasks are aligned with strategic objectives. It also involves organizing work to achieve goals and ensuring that tasks are aligned with strategic objectives. For leaders who embrace the human resource frame, they will prioritize the well-being of people in the organization, and they tend to focus on developing relationships, offering support, and creating environments where individuals feel valued and motivated. For the political frame, this frame is centered on power dynamics, coalition building, and managing conflict. Leaders who are attuned to the political realities can navigate the complexities of organizational life by aligning interests, resolving conflicts, and negotiating resources. And for the symbolic frame, leaders who use the symbolic frame focus on meaning, values, and culture. They inspire others through vision, create symbols that reinforce the organization's identity, and provide a sense of purpose and direction. The next point that the chapter covers is effective leadership and its challenges. The chapter also addresses the challenges that leaders face in applying these theories and frames. Leadership is not just about influencing others. It involves managing complexity, ambiguity, and conflicting demands. Leaders must be able to do a range of things like diagnose problems and use the 4 frames to understand organizational issues from multiple perspectives. They have to adapt to change, lead through periods of transition and uncertainty by being flexible and adjusting strategies as needed. Leaders also have to manage conflicts. They have to do things like navigate power struggles, deal with differing agendas, and deal with resistance to change by using the political frame effectively. They also have to inspire and motivate, provide vision and direction, especially during difficult times, through the symbolic frame. Lastly, an important thing that this chapter covers is practical leadership skills. The chapter highlights several practical skills that leaders need to be effective. Communication is definitely the top of the list, as it helps leaders be able to communicate clearly and persuasively, and it's a key skill for leaders, particularly when aligning people with organizational goals or vision. Leaders must also possess emotional intelligence. They need to be self-aware, empathetic, and skilled in managing their own emotions and those of others. Leaders must make decisions that balance both short-term needs and long-term goals, often involving trade-offs between efficiency, human needs, power relations, and symbolic meaning. Leaders must also have visionary thinking. The ability to craft and communicate a compelling vision for the future while aligning people to work towards shared goals is critical for leadership success. The authors conclude by emphasizing that leadership is inherently complex and multifaceted. The chapter underscores the idea that no single leadership style or approach can address every situation. Effective leaders are those who can move fluidly between different frames and leadership theories, depending on the circumstances, and who can blend the structural, human, political, and symbolic elements of their roles. To summarize, Chapter 17 explores leadership from both a theoretical and practical perspective. It also provides an in-depth discussion of various leadership theories, while also highlighting how the 4 frames can be applied to leadership practice. This chapter stresses the importance of flexibility, emotional intelligence, and visionary thinking, and it encourages leaders to continuously adapt their strategies to the changing demands of the organization. Next, we transition to Chapter 18, Reframing Leadership. Chapter 18 delves deeper into the concept of leadership, emphasizing how leaders can use the 4 frames to enhance their effectiveness in diverse organizational contexts. This chapter encourages leaders to move beyond one-dimensional approaches and develop a multifaceted view of leadership. Some key points in this chapter include the complexity of leadership. The authors emphasize that leadership is inherently complex and multifaceted. Successful leaders must be able to navigate and adapt to a variety of organizational challenges, all while balancing multiple perspectives. Leadership is not simply about guiding others. It's about understanding and responding to the diverse needs and dynamics within an organization. In conclusion, Chapter 18 highlights the importance of reframing leadership to address the complexities of organizational life. It emphasizes how leaders can use the 4 frames to better understand and respond to challenges, motivate people, and lead people through change. The chapter stresses that leadership is not a static skill, but a dynamic practice that requires flexibility, vision, and a multifaceted approach. Effective leaders are those who can balance the technical, human, political, and symbolic dimensions of their roles. As we transition to Chapter 19, Reframing Change and Organizations, we see that Chapter 19 explores how organizations can navigate and manage change effectively. The chapter emphasizes the importance of understanding the complexities of change and using the 4 frames to address the various challenges that come with it. Some key points of this chapter include the nature of change in organizations. The authors discuss the destined change in organizations and the challenges it presents. Change often creates uncertainty, fear, and resistance, making it one of the most difficult aspects of leadership. However, change is necessary for growth, adaptation, and survival, and effective leadership is required to guide organizations through these transitions. They highlight that change can take many forms, and these forms include planned change, intentional efforts to improve or modify organizational processes, structures, or cultures. And the second one is unplanned change, external or internal events that force organizations to react, such as economic downturns, new technologies, or shifts in market conditions. Another point that the chapter discusses is resistance to change. Resistance to change is a common challenge that leaders face on a day-to-day basis. The chapter explores the sources of resistance, which can arise from things like fear of the unknown. Employees may feel anxious about how the change will impact their roles, security, or future. It can also arise from loss of control. Change can make people feel that they have less control over their work environment or job responsibilities. And another source that this can arise from is inadequate communication. If leaders do not communicate the reasons for the change or how it will be implemented, employees may resist out of confusion or mistrust. Next, the chapter discusses leading change effectively. The chapter provides practical advice for leading change in organizations. The chapter says to set a clear vision. Leaders must articulate a compelling vision for the future, helping employees understand why the change is necessary and how it will benefit the organization and its people. Another piece of advice that they provide is to engage people. Successful change requires buy-in from employees at all levels. Leaders should involve employees in the change process, social feedback, and creative opportunities for participation and collaboration. Another piece of advice is communicate continuously. Clear, consistent communication is essential during this time of change. Leaders should provide regular updates, address concerns, and keep people informed about the progress and impact of the change. Another point the chapter highlights is leadership styles and flexibility. The chapter highlights the importance of leadership flexibility. Leaders should not strictly follow one style, but rather adapt their approach based on the situation and the organizational context. For example, in a crisis, a leader might need to focus on more structural solutions and provide clear direction, while in a period of transformation, the leader might rely more on symbolic leadership to inspire and motivate employees. The authors also note that leaders often gravitate towards one frame based on their personality, experiences, or organizational culture. However, effective leadership requires the ability to shift between frames depending on what the situation demands. Another point is reframing leadership challenges. The chapter explores various leadership challenges, such as managing change, overcoming resistance, and addressing conflict, and explains how reframing can be used to address these issues. With managing change, leaders must deal with the uncertainty and resistance that often accompany change. By using the four frames, they can assess the impact of change from multiple angles. Some of these changes might involve structural adjustments, emotional needs of employees, political resistance, and symbolic meaning. And they can use this information to develop strategies that address both the technical and human aspects of change. When it comes to addressing conflict in organizations, leaders can use the political frame to understand the sources of conflict, negotiate solutions, and create alliances. Additionally, symbolic leadership can help align people's values and bring meaning into the conflict resolution process. Speaking in terms of overcoming resistance, leaders often face resistance from employees or other stakeholders. Reframing can help leaders identify whether the resistance is due to structural issues, something like unclear roles, or human resource challenges, which may be something like lack of motivation or trust, maybe power dynamics, which may be like power struggles within the organization, or symbolic concerns, such as loss of meaning or vision. By diagnosing the underlying causes, leaders can better address the resistance. Another point is the role of visionary leadership. The authors stress the importance of vision and leadership. Visionary leadership is central to inspiring and guiding organizations through both stable and turbulent times. Leaders who articulate a clear and compelling vision can align people around a common purpose, helping them navigate challenges with greater unity and motivation. The symbolic frame plays a crucial role in visionary leadership by creating symbols and rituals that reinforce the vision. leaders can build a strong organizational culture that sustains motivation and commitment over time. Next, the chapter discusses a little bit about balancing practical and inspirational aspects of leaders. The chapter reminds leaders that effective leadership requires both practical and inspirational elements. While organizational systems and structures are essential for achieving goals, the human, political, and symbolic aspects of leadership are just as important for fostering engagement, resolving conflicts, and creating lasting impact. Finally, when it comes to leadership development, the chapter encourages leaders to actively engage in developing their leadership capabilities. By continuously practicing reframing, reflecting on their leadership style, and remaining open to feedback, leaders can become more adaptable, empathetic, and effective. Leaders should be flexible and adaptable. Change processes rarely go exactly as planned. Leaders must be willing to adjust their strategies and approaches based on feedback, new information, or unexpected challenges. The chapter also goes on to discuss the role of leadership in change. They stress that leadership plays a crucial role in managing change. Leaders must be able to balance the practical aspects of change, such as restructuring processes, with the emotional and symbolic aspects, such as maintaining morale and creating meaning. Leadership is not just about making decisions, but also about inspiring and motivating people through times of uncertainty and transformation. Lastly, the chapter concludes by talking about sustaining change and emphasizing the importance of sustaining change over the long term. Implementing change is only the first step. Leaders must ensure that the new ways of working are embedded in the organization's culture and systems. This requires ongoing communication, reinforcement, and support to ensure that the change is lasting and successful. In sum, Chapter 19 explores how leaders can effectively manage change by using the four frames to address its complexities. By balancing the structural, human resources, political, and symbolic aspects, leaders can overcome resistance, creating a compelling vision and guide organizations through successful transitions. The chapter provides both theoretical insights and practical advice, emphasizing that leadership during change is about more than just managing tasks. It's about engaging people, addressing their concerns, and inspiring them to embrace new ways of working. As we transition to Chapter 20, Reframing Ethics and Spirit, we see that Chapter 20 focuses on the ethical dimensions of leadership and the role of spirituality in organizations. This chapter explores how leaders can navigate the complex ethical challenges they face and foster a sense of purpose, integrity, and moral responsibility in their organizations. The authors use the four frames to discuss how ethics and spirit can be reframed to create a more ethical, meaningful, and purposeful workplace. Some key points for this chapter include the importance of ethics in leadership. The authors begin by emphasizing the critical role ethics play in leadership. Ethical decisions and behaviors shape the organizational culture, influence relationships, and affect the overall effectiveness of the organization. Leaders are responsible for setting the ethical tone and modeling the ethical behavior. However, making ethical decisions is often complicated by competing interests, power dynamics, and conflicting values. Another point that the chapter covers on is spirituality in organizations. The authors discuss the growing interest in spirituality within organizations, suggesting that a focus on spirit and purpose can contribute to the ethical behavior and a sense of fulfillment. Spirituality in this context refers to a sense of connectedness, purpose, and meaning in work, as well as alignment with deeper values and principles. Leaders are encouraged to foster a workplace where employees feel like they are a part of something greater than themselves, and where values like compassion, integrity, and fairness are prioritized. Leaders who embrace spirituality can inspire others to find meaning in their work and create a more humane, ethical, and value-driven organization. However, they caution that spirituality in organizations should be inclusive but not force a specific religious or spiritual belief on employees. Instead, it should focus on shared values and collective purpose. Another point that the chapter covers is the role of leaders in spiritual and ethical development. The chapter stresses that leaders have a critical role in developing an ethical and spiritual organizational culture. Leaders must model ethical behavior, encourage open dialogue about ethics, and create systems that support moral decision making. They also need to engage employees in discussions about the organization's purpose, values, and ethical standards, ensuring that ethics are not only discussed but lived in everyday practices. Leaders must also address ethical dilemmas and conflicts when they arise, acting as role models who demonstrate moral courage, integrity, and fairness. By doing so, they set an example that encourages ethical behavior across all levels of an organization. Up next is ethical decision-making. The authors explore the complexities of ethical decision-making, highlighting that leaders often face situations where the right course of action is not immediately clear. They discuss various frameworks for ethical decision-making, such as utilitarianism, making decisions based on the greater good for the greatest number. Another framework is rights-based approaches, which focus on the rights and dignity of individuals. And lastly, justice-based approaches, ensuring fairness and equality in decision-making processes. Lastly, the chapter covers on building ethical and spiritually fulfilling organizations. The chapter concludes by providing practical suggestions for leaders to create organizations that are both ethical and spiritually fulfilling. These suggestions include establishing a clear set of ethical principles and values that guide decision-making, creating an environment where people feel psychologically safe to speak up about ethical concerns, encouraging transparency, honesty, and accountability at all levels, aligning organizational goals with broader social and environmental concerns to promote a sense of purpose. And lastly, providing opportunities for personal and professional growth, helping individuals find meaning and fulfillment in their work. To conclude, Chapter 20 explores the crucial role that ethics and spirituality play in leadership and organizational success. By applying the 4 frames, leaders can address the ethical challenges they face, create a culture of integrity, and foster a sense of spiritual fulfillment among employees. The chapter stresses that ethical and spiritual leadership requires self-awareness, moral courage, and the ability to inspire others to live out shared values in the workplace. Ultimately, organizations that prioritize ethics and spirit can create a more just, humane, and meaningful work environment. Next, we move on to Chapter 21, bringing it all together. Change and leadership in action. Chapter 21 serves as a conclusion to the book, bringing together the key ideas and concepts discussed throughout the chapters. The chapter emphasizes the importance of integrating the 4 frames into a coherent approach for understanding and leading organizations. It encourages leaders to embrace the complexity and use the different frames flexibly to address organizational challenges. Some main points from this chapter include the power of the 4 frames. The authors start off by reiterating the central idea of the book. The 4 frames provide distinct but complementary perspectives on organizations. Each frame offers a unique lens through which leaders can understand organizational dynamics, diagnose problems, and implement solutions. The 4 frames are tools that enable leaders to see the complexities of organizational life and act more effectively. To reiterate, the structural frame focuses on rules, roles, policies, and procedures, offering solutions to organizational efficiency and design. The human resource frame emphasizes relationships, motivation, and development, addressing how individuals are treated and supported within the organization. The political frame deals with power, conflict, and negotiation, recognizing that organizations are arenas where different groups compete for resources and influence. And lastly, symbolic frame highlights culture, meaning, and values, providing a way to inspire and motivate people through vision, rituals, and symbols. The chapter goes on to discuss integrating the 4 frames for effective leadership. The symbolic frame highlights culture, meaning, and values, providing a way to inspire and motivate people through vision, rituals, and symbols. The symbolic frame can help one diagnose problems more accurately from multiple perspectives, address both practical issues and the human dimensions of leadership, balance competing interests, and navigate power dynamics, and also inspire and create meaning, building a strong organizational culture. The chapter also discusses the role of leadership in organizational change. It revisits the theme of change, which has been a key topic throughout the book. The authors emphasize that leading change is one of the most challenging aspects of leadership, but using the 4 frames can make this process more manageable. Leaders need to 1. Use the structural frame to design new systems and processes that support change. 2. Use the human resource frame to address employees' needs, concerns, and motivations during the transition. 3. Use the political frame to navigate power dynamics, manage conflict, and secure support for change initiatives. And lastly, 4. Use the symbolic frame to communicate the vision for change, inspire commitment, and reinforce the cultural aspects of the transformation. The chapter goes on to discuss the challenges of leadership. The authors acknowledge that leadership is inherently difficult. The complexities of politics, organizational culture, and human behavior makes leadership a challenging and dynamic task. However, they argue that by using the 4 frames, leaders can gain a deeper understanding of their organizations and become more effective in their roles. Leadership is not about adhering to one fixed set of behaviors or strategies, but about being adaptable, self-aware, and able to diagnose problems from multiple perspectives. The chapter encourages leaders to embrace ambiguity and complexity of their roles, using the 4 frames as tools to find solutions, foster collaboration, and inspire others. The chapter also goes on to talk about the ethics and values in leadership. The chapter emphasizes the importance of ethical leadership. They argue that effective leaders must be guided by strong ethical principles, and they should use the 4 frames to ensure that decisions align with the organization's values and mission. Leadership involves not only achieving organizational goals, but also doing so in a way that's very fair, just, and aligned with the greater good. Ethical leadership requires a commitment to integrity, transparency, and accountability. Leaders must model ethical behavior, encourage ethical practices throughout the organization, and address ethical dilemmas when they arise. To conclude, the authors discuss the future of leadership, and they suggest that the future of leadership lies in the ability to blend analytical rigor with emotional intelligence. They call for leaders to be both strategic and compassionate, focusing on both the rational and human sides of organizations. As organizations continue to evolve in complexity, leaders must adapt by embracing new ideas, continuously learning, and maintaining a deep understanding of their organization's needs and challenges. The chapter encourages leaders to stay curious, flexible, and open to new perspectives, while keeping a clear vision of the organization's goals and values. Lastly, we covered Chapter 22, Epilogue, Artistry, Choice, and Leadership, which is the last chapter in Reforming Organizations. Chapter 22 reflects on the key themes of concepts explored throughout the book. It serves as a final synthesis, reiterating the value of the 4-frame model and the significance of leadership in navigating the complexities of organizational life. Some main ideas in this chapter include the role of leaders. The authors emphasize that effective leadership requires flexibility and the ability to switch between the frames. Leaders should not simply rely on one frame, but rather use all 4 frames as a toolkit to address the various challenges that arise in organizations. The epilogue reinforces the idea that leaders must develop the capacity to diagnose situations from different perspectives and take actions that consider both the rational and emotional aspects of organizational life. The importance of ethical leadership is also highlighted. The author stressed that leaders must lead with integrity, make decisions based on values, and be role models with the organization. Leadership is organization's values and promotes fairness and justice. The chapter also goes on to discuss embracing complexity. The epilogue underscores the complexity of leadership and organizational life. Leaders face multiple, often competing demands, and must navigate an ever-changing environment. The four-frame approach helps leaders embrace this complexity, allowing them to adapt and respond effectively to a wide range of challenges. The ability to view situations from multiple perspectives is key to making better decisions, fostering innovation, and leading change. This last chapter also goes on to talk about the continuous journey of learning. The authors conclude by highlighting that leadership is a lifelong journey of learning and growth. The challenges leaders face will evolve, and they must continually expand their knowledge, skills, and understanding of organizational dynamics. This requires self-awareness, a willingness to learn from experiences, and the capacity to reflect on one's leadership style and decisions. Lastly, a call to action. The authors end with a call to action for leaders to put the ideas from the book into practice. By using the four frames and embracing the challenges of leadership, they can create more effective, dynamic, and meaningful organizations. The epilogue encourages leaders to approach their roles with a sense of responsibility, purpose, and openness to new ideas. In summary, Chapter 22 reflects on the key concepts of the book, reinforcing the importance of the four frames for understanding and leading organizations. It emphasizes the need for leaders to be adaptable, ethical, and reflective in their approach, and calls for continuous learning and growth. Ultimately, the epilogue stresses that leadership is both a complex and evolving journey, and that using the four-frame model helps leaders navigate the complexities of organizational life with a greater effectiveness. And that will be my summary of chapters 15 through 22 for Reframing Organizations. I hope you enjoyed my summaries, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.